Hi everybody, welcome to the FlowFuse webinar. So about me, my name is Joe Pavitt. My official job title at FlowFuse is Head of UX and Design. Wear many different hats. Some of you may know me from my work on Node-RED Dashboard 2.0, also known as FlowFuse Dashboard. Work on Node-RED Academy as well. So you may hear my voice and see my face a bit too much, but I'm back again. So we're going to have to go with it for a little bit more. And then I'm going to pass over to Steve.
Hi everyone, my name is Stephen McLaughlin, or Steve, and I'm a senior engineer here at FlowFuse. Prior to FlowFuse, I spent about 25 years in a large automotive plant, so I've got a lot of experience with programming PLCs, integrating field technologies between IT, OT, web programming, database programming. Like Joe, I wore a lot of hats and spun a lot of plates. If you've got any questions, stick them in the Q&A.
Cheers, Steve. I'll be doing most of the presenting today, and then, like I say, Steve will be on hand for anything that was maybe a little bit too tricky for me, and I'll hopefully be able to answer some questions in the chat as well.
I'll be switching my camera off while you present, Joe.
That's fine. Cheers, Steve. So we're just going to quickly get started to make sure that everyone's kind of on the same page and cover a few of the topics that Node-RED is used for before we dive into the specifics of running Node-RED in the cloud, running Node-RED at edge, hybrid use cases. So what we're wanting to talk through first is generally as FlowFuse, where are we seeing most of the use cases for Node-RED in the professional environment, also in a hobby environment? Generally, there's four particular topics that we see in common themes. First one and the most popular one is manufacturing and integrated IoT, which is what Steve was talking about in terms of what he was doing in his previous role in automotive industry. He was using Node-RED to run and operate that automotive plant. We also see it in a lot in terms of robotic process automation. So Node-RED kind of defining the decision logic around controlling machinery as well, whether that be in manufacturing or be outside of manufacturing, that kind of falls into its own little black bracket. Data integration, which is something we'll dive into a lot more later on, which is generally I've got data in A, I need to do some level of conversion to get it into a different format or send it into a different place. That, whilst part of manufacturing can include that, we do see that in much broader industries. And I will actually talk through a couple of customer examples later on as well. And the kind of most well-known use case, I guess, for Node-RED, particularly out in the more open source community area, is around home automation. And what we're actually really seeing is a lot of customers coming onto FlowFuse, using FlowFuse and Node-RED in their hobby world, realizing actually there's so much more they can do with Node-RED when they scale it up and adapting it into their professional environment. And that's a story we hear over and over again of people that have used Node-RED as a kind of hobby in the home automation and then gone, oh, wait a second, I can use this in my job. And then realizing that actually it can scale to levels they hadn't really appreciated. Now, even though there was just four use cases, actually Node-RED really can be just taken as any sample of what we show here. So at the very low level, there's the general concept that Node-RED can be used for reading data, and that's reading data from hardware or from files, whatever it may be. You are generally then parsing it, converting it, and then in the computation and the monitoring layer, computation could be transforming it into something completely different. You might run it through a machine learning model. You might do some analysis on it to looking at, like, if you got a particular number breaching a particular value, monitoring in terms of data visualization. But fundamentally, what we then see is the stage after that is some level of action. You might have a notification or an alert sent to somebody, an email sent to somebody. It might actually be a feedback loop back into the hardware where you read data from to then control said hardware. Lots of different use cases, but they are generally some level of combination of this particular diagram. And it might just be just the left-hand side, just the right-hand side, the whole thing. But that's really where we see it. So those four use cases can easily be mapped to that and many, many others. Now, in the manufacturing context, something that we see a lot is ISA 95, which is an international standard for creating an interface for automating between enterprise and control systems. Now, Node-RED, again, where we talked about can be used at those kind of 4-level columns, we see also Node-RED now used at every single tier of this as well. So to dive into use cases specifically, if we look at level 0, we see data and Node-RED used for data extraction, protocol conversion, and hardware control. And in the topic of cloud versus edge, generally that is edge, right? You've got your hardware running in a factory or running at home, wherever it may be, right? You are extracting that data directly out of the hardware involved. For wrong way. So then for level 1, there is some overlap here as well with level 0. You still do have that protocol conversion. For example, it might be PLC to PLC conversion. It might be a particular protocol into a PLC. You could get just raw data collection at this level as well. Or you might starting to do some level of edge computation or analysis. So for example, a use case that I know Steve built in his previous role was using OCR, character recognition within Node-RED, using a camera to read VIN numbers on an automotive line. So that was using Node-RED at the edge to be able to do computation before the data was then passed up. And you've got lots of different instances of this running before it's then passed up into kind of more centralized form. For level 2, in terms of monitoring and supervision, we're really starting to kind of get lots of things now piecing into a centralized view of the world. So you've got more of this, like I say, supervision type use case. This could be an OE dashboard. It could be using it for general HMIs on a particular line or on a particular factory floor, and really starting to emulate what you're seeing in generally in SCADA systems in the manufacturing world, or in the Industry 4.0 world. At the MES level, in level 3, again, it kind of just takes it up that one higher level of notch. You're starting to see more dashboarding rather than data extraction. You will still see some level of computation here as well. And then finally, at level 4, it really is a lot of top level analysis. You get top messaging and reporting, mostly HMI focus here as well. But you can see as you get to the different layers how the use cases change. But Node-RED is still applicable in all of these. And what I want to use is these examples as we go through to talk through actually what elements of this particular architecture and these particular levels would live as a Node-RED on the cloud, or could live as Node-RED on the cloud, and could live as a Node-RED running at edge. So let's quickly dive into what we mean by those two particular pieces, and we may all be on the same page already, but I just want to make sure, and also kind of cover where these things mean. So if you were to deploy Node-RED at the edge right now, generally the ways that you're going to do that, sorry, Node-RED on the cloud right now, generally the ways you're going to do that are things like FlowFuse, AWS, GCP, any of the major cloud providers, right? Now, the pros of that is that it's super easy just to get up and running, and obviously biased, but it's particularly easy with FlowFuse. It's just a couple of clicks and you will have an instance of Node-RED running in the cloud. With AWS or GCP, you've got to set up your own Docker container, but it's not too bad in terms of the onboarding. You've got an ease of deployment and reliability in the sense of you have got entire cloud infrastructure running in behind this Node-RED instance, so you can be reliable that actually it's going to be accessible. Now, it's accessible if you have a public internet connection. That's one of the cons, in that actually, if you did have this centralized cloud instance of Node-RED, and you are talking to that instance from somewhere that actually doesn't necessarily always have public internet connection, or internet goes down sometimes, that connection is tethered. Whatever that thing that depends on that cloud instance is suddenly cannot operate, especially if you've got mission critical logic running at the cloud level. There is no direct hardware integration. One of the joys of Node-RED is just how easy it is to integrate in with hardware. Well, if you're running the Node-RED environment in the cloud, then actually being able to talk directly to hardware and read data from hardware is just not going to be plausible, right? You have to have something at the hardware level extracting that data out to then pass that up to a cloud level running an instance of Node-RED. And there's hosting costs involved. You are responsible for paying whoever who your cloud provider is going to be. Albeit another pro of that is that you aren't then responsible for the overheads of managing the infrastructure, right? It's just there and it's ready to go. When we compare that against running Node-RED at the edge, that could mean you have it at home, right? The home automation use case, it's running on a Raspberry Pi. It might be running on just your own laptop. If we see it more in the manufacturing type use case, it's running on a factory floor in PLCs, or you can even be more in the greenfield world where actually it's completely remote hardware, barely has any internet connection at all. But it could still be running an instance of Node-RED to extract data to do edge computation or whatever that use case might be. Now, a pro of this is really that it's the hardware integration. It's you can have this thing sat right next to your hardware and it can be extracting that data out. And you don't have to depend on the public internet to be able to get that data off the hardware, right? It is right there on the same network. And that is very good in terms of resilience. If you have a network issue, wherever your Node-RED instance is running, let's say you have a factory floor that's got a public internet connection, or if that public internet connection gets tethered, your factory floor can still run and operate because the Node-RED instance would also be running there at the edge. And we're going to dive into a few more use cases in detail about those particular scenarios and actually having some kind of hybrid system in place as well. For the negative side of running Node-RED at the edge, it can very quickly become very difficult to keep track of everything. We have customers at FlowFuse running thousands of instances of Node-RED. Well, prior to FlowFuse, all those 1,000 instances were in their own separate systems. They were having to manually track all of those different Node-RED instances. That becomes a significant pain in terms of overhead. You don't necessarily have remote access. So if you actually then want to be able to go and make changes to those flows on that particular instance, you have to know explicitly how to do that and where it lives and be able to get access to that network, or you physically got to go there and be able to literally plug into the machine where you've got that instance running. The operational overheads and the security overheads are also then significant, right? You are responsible for if this thing goes down. And from a security standpoint, you are also responsible for making sure this thing is secure. And especially if you're starting to extract data from, important hardware, security is a very, very important factor. Now we've got cloud, we've got edge, but in the real world, you don't generally just have one of those things. In some use cases, you will, and we'll cover some of those later. But generally, what we're seeing is more of a hybrid use case. And in that hybrid use case, we would see multiple remote instances and running at the edge of Node-RED that would report up into more of a centralized instance of Node-RED. For example, the edge instances might be extracting data from a piece of hardware. They would then report up into a cloud-hosted instance of Node-RED that might have a dashboard that shows the values of that particular hardware. So that if someone wants to check in on performance or check in on a status of something, they can just log into the central cloud dashboard, and then they can see all the data being reported in from their edge use cases. Now, in this particular use case, it's not generally a pattern that we see where we have edge instances talking directly to a cloud instance of Node-RED. We do have multiple customers that do it, and it works very well. What we generally see is more of a UNS type use case. I'm just going to quickly grab myself a drink. Where you have an MQTT broker, or OPC in OPC server in that particular case, but we'll take an MQTT broker in this use case where your edge instances are reporting and publishing data into an MQTT broker. That then might also be stored into a historian or a database as well. And then your cloud instance can subscribe to that particular MQTT broker. So you don't necessarily have a direct connection between the remote instances and the cloud instances. But actually at scale, this is the kind of pattern that we start seeing. And the reason that we start seeing it is because if you then want to start adding more and more edge devices, all they've got to do is just publish to the MQTT broker. The cloud instance hasn't necessarily got to change. And then it means that you can then scale that up to I don't say with FlowFuse, we have people running thousands of remote instances of what we call remote instances. So whilst these are very much simplified diagrams, what I did want to quickly show you is a diagram that's a little bit more intense, but it will show you what we see on a regular basis of how we see Node-REDs being deployed in this case. And it's deployed in this case around a factory deployment and where Node-RED would live. All right, so what we'll take is the example of, on the left-hand side, we have our edge use case, right? We have our body shop. We may have a laser welding system. That laser welding system is going to be formed up of three pieces of hardware. The actual laser welding hardware, that talks to a local PLC, and then both of those talk to a local PC, which might show a dashboard just reporting on how well that laser welding hardware is working. That itself could then publish up to MQTT to a UNS environment, or directly to another server with another Node-RED running on it at the plant level. That plant level might also then be collecting data from the paint shop and everywhere else on the factory floor to build more higher level pictures and doing more higher level analysis on how the whole plant is doing rather than one particular line within that plant. So these things in theory are still running at the edge, right? They are still running on your factory floor in your plant. What we then see is generally there is a company IT layer, right? So the company IT layer may now be responsible for multiple plants, but they also need their own view of the world. They also want to be able to see how well these particular plants are doing. They also want to be able to have the view of the world to make sure that if things go wrong, they are made aware of it. And then finally, at the very, very top level, you may have cloud, where actually your company IT may be interfacing with cloud services like AI, or they might have cloud-based storage. There may also be some Node-RED running in the cloud to be able to produce more dashboarding for the execs at the very top that just want to be able to look at something quickly on the go, rather than having to be on the private network of a factory floor or whatever it might be. So we can see again how Node-RED is distributed in so many different ways throughout this entire architecture. So later on, what we're actually going to do is cover how you can get a better picture of this particular world with FlowFuse, and also being able to have this concept of remote instances and hosted instances. But it does cover here how actually edge can mean multiple different things, right? Edge here means, yes, absolutely, running on your PLC, running on a laser welding system. Edge also still means running on a server in your own factory floor, right? That is still not in the cloud environment where you would have necessarily access to everything and everywhere. So when we consider why and when for cloud and edge, we also have the opportunity with FlowFuse to be able to manage that entire ecosystem. And if you've got stuff running at edge, if you've got stuff running in cloud, FlowFuse will give you a single picture of that entire world. Now, FlowFuse itself can also be cloud hosted, right? There is FlowFuse Cloud. You could go now and sign up for a free trial and be up and running in 30 seconds with your own instances of Node-RED. But you can also run FlowFuse at the edge, right? And I'm going to cover a little bit in detail what that means and what that looks like as well, where you could self-host FlowFuse within your own private network, right? We have multiple customers running FlowFuse in completely closed off networks. You could have FlowFuse running in a self-hosted environment on your factory floor and still managing the ecosystem of Node-RED instances that were themselves also running at the edge. We also have a dedicated offering, which actually is similar to FlowFuse Cloud. It's just that you are then the only team and the only customer running on that particular instance of FlowFuse, which we generally see for our bigger customers. So when you manage Node-RED with FlowFuse, we use two terms, and I have been using them a little bit as we've gone through. So what we would call is a hosted instance, which is where Node-RED is running in the same server as FlowFuse. And we then also have remote instances, which are when Node-RED is managed by FlowFuse, but not running on the same hardware. All right. So that could be at the edge, but I will cover again in a minute what I specifically mean by that. So for hosted instances, in the example of FlowFuse Cloud, a hosted instance would be running in the cloud as well. Right. In the instance of self-hosted, if you've got FlowFuse on the right-hand side here running in a private server, a hosted instance is also going to run on that same server. Okay, so when we consider cloud and edge here, there is also the difference of hosted and remote, right? When we come in regards to FlowFuse. Now, remote instances are also have an option here in the sense that we have FlowFuse. We can take FlowFuse Cloud here as an example on the left-hand side. We have our hosted instances, which are running in the same environment on the same server as FlowFuse, but we also have remote instances. Now, those remote instances are living somewhere else. It could be at the edge, as we've discussed already. They are managed by the FlowFuse device agent and then can have a direct connection back into FlowFuse. So FlowFuse gives you that single picture of them all, but they are actually running somewhere completely different. So if we go back to that diagram that we had earlier in terms of deploying Node-RED at scale within a factory, if we added FlowFuse in at the company IT level, right, this would be a self-hosted example where you want to deploy FlowFuse within your own company network. We could then install the FlowFuse device agent on all of those different pieces of machinery that are running their own Node-RED instances. And then what that means then is that if something goes down, these remote instances will continue to carry on running, right? Whenever you're running edge instances or remote instances through FlowFuse, they will carry on running until they are explicitly told otherwise. And this is one of the good things about having this view of the world, is that you still get the advantage of an instance at the edge being completely reliable in the sense of, and having the resilience that if something goes down at the company IT level and the IT infrastructure fails, the OT guys don't have to suffer for that. They can still have their Node-RED instances running. And FlowFuse can still manage that once that then comes back up again if you need to deploy new flows or you need to deploy updates. So you have now got Node-RED running at the edge. You even have FlowFuse running at the edge in terms of your own private network. And FlowFuse could still even have a remote instance actually running in the cloud, right? FlowFuse just considers a remote instance as being something that's not where I am. All right, so you could have a cloud instance here that was managed by a FlowFuse. And FlowFuse, like I say, in this environment, the hosted instances would be the ones on the same server. The remote instances would be the ones either side of this red line. Just going to go another drink. So what I would like to quickly talk through is, and everything I've shown so far is all kind of in theory. I've got three particular customer sample examples, and these are real customers of FlowFuse. In some cases, they've already done webinars for us. In some cases, there's a public customer story. I think I've actually seen one name already pop up in the chat that that provided me some details to put in this slide. So thank you, Josh, for that. The first example is Sky. Sky are a UK-based broadcaster, one of the biggest UK broadcasters in the country. They use Node-RED for data workflow and transformation. They don't have any instances running at the edge. They use FlowFuse Cloud, and they have an entire video processing pipeline that runs through Node-RED. And this is a webinar that Sky did for us. I think it was 2 months ago. If you are interested, you can go back and watch that. And they talk in a lot more detail about specifically what it is that, that they do with the data, but they use Node-RED for their video processing pipeline. And they are allowed to then to be able to go from one format into another. So talking back through those use cases earlier, and all of this is completely cloud, right? They are in a use case with the data integration, they don't need anything on edge. They publish directly from their own local machinery, which doesn't have Node-RED running on it, pushes up into the cloud, and then they process everything in our FlowFuse cloud environment running on cloud-hosted Node-RED instances. Now, one thing that Sky do as well, which is a really nice use case, albeit it's a restriction that they have. I'm saying they're running on FlowFuse Cloud. They're not, sorry, they're FlowFuse self-hosted. Because they have two networks. They have a development network and they have a production network. Those two things are not allowed to talk to each other. So what they do with FlowFuse is actually use GitHub. So there's a integration with FlowFuse where they have their development flows. They test things, break things, make sure things are working the way they want, improvements are coming in and everything else. And then when that's ready, they use pipelines within FlowFuse, which is just a one-click push my flow to GitHub button. That pushes to a GitHub repository. Then on their production network, they have another instance of FlowFuse running. And in that instance of FlowFuse, they pull from that GitHub repository, and then that then gets deployed out to all of their production. So that's their way of doing version control. Now, traditionally within FlowFuse, we have our own version control system using a thing called snapshots. You can do all that yourself. But because they can't go from their development environment into their production environment, then this was their other way of working as well, which was quite interesting. So I thought I would at least share that. So they're still using hosted instances. So they're entirely hosted instances in both cases, but they are hosted instances in a development network, hosted instances in a production network. They don't use any integrations with like edge devices. The next example comes from one of our system integrators who are basically working on, they use FlowFuse for many of their customers. And they guys are Maker. They did a webinar, again, very recently. I can't remember exactly which month it was. I can't say the name of the company they were working for, but it was in the food and beverage industry. They were using Node-RED as a hybrid scenario. So they had both cloud Node-RED, which was doing dashboarding. It was basically replacing a bunch of MES applications that their end customer had, saving them a significant amount of money on licensing fees. They just built it all in Node-RED and managed it through FlowFuse instead. They then had an MQTT broker that was running on HiveMQ, but also used FlowFuse because FlowFuse brings in a bunch of extra features you can integrate in third-party brokers, for example. You get full schema views and documentation, stuff like that, to make it easier to work with MQTT within your own flows. Then they had remote instances running directly inside the factory network, running at the edge. And these were FlowFuse Cloud use cases. So energy monitoring application for dashboarding. Pardon me, sorry. And then the MES applications were running in FlowFuse Cloud, so they could then get access to those anywhere. That was published subscribing to MQTT broker and also getting data from their historian. And then the remote instances were essentially using Node-RED to be able to do data conversion and data enrichment. So they would enforce data models. They would do some level of structural analysis that was done at the edge to then basically reduce the amount of data they were then pumping up into their MQTT broker. But yeah, they were deployed in Docker containers that then ran on a VM in their factory network. So that shows again how you can have this hybrid system of running at edge, but also running at the cloud level. Now, the last particular customer example that I wanted to talk through is with a company called Abrasive Technology. And I believe we have Josh. I think I've seen Josh in the chat. So Josh, please forgive me if I get any of this wrong, but please correct me in the chat if I do. For Abrasive, they are looking at precision manufacturing, and they use Node-RED for multiple different use cases. It's actually a really nice blend of the previous two use cases. They have both cloud infrastructure use cases, whereby they have a cloud-based ERP system, which is Microsoft Business Central. Node-RED allows them to integrate directly with that ERP system, be able to make custom integrations. They can do custom reporting, making dashboards and things like that at their own FlowFuse cloud level. Below that, we on the left-hand side here have multiple different, what we would consider to be remote instances running at the edge. So if they have on a Raspberry Pi, they use OpenCV.js to be able to do machine vision, and do automated control of their machinery. So there's a particular screenshot here. This is a Node-RED dashboard that they have built. And I think they're in the process of actually doing even further enhancements on this at the moment, which Josh can share hopefully in the near future. But this is all entirely running within Node-RED. And then that allows them to do control based on the image recognition of the hardware in front of them. And so they have some level of automated control, but then also have the ability to manually step in as well. The other work that they have is a local server. That local server, they have their own custom REST APIs built in Node-RED that allows the edge hardware to then talk to and basically have a common way of communicating with their database, but also they have this concept of the internal manufacturing API, which serves as a single source of truth for the calculations used in their multiple different processes. So rather than having to have that logic live right at the edge, they have something that's just in a little bit closer to the centralized ecosystem, and then they can have all of those calculations done there. So the data gets sent to that API, returns the calculation, and then they handle that accordingly. And they also have a bunch of custom machine UIs. So a particular example was I think it was a laser machine. I can try and remember my notes now. It was a laser UI. There we go. They're a low volume, high mix manufacturing company. And so that means that a lot of the software that gets shipped with that particular piece of machinery that they have bought doesn't necessarily suit their particular use cases. So what they could do was in Node-RED build UI that interfaced directly with that particular hardware. And in the example that Josh gave me with the laser hardware, it just required an XML file to configure it, right? So they could generate that XML file within Node-RED, put a UI on top of it to be able to control that piece of machinery. And then they had now are saving, a lot of time every single time they're interfacing with that machinery because the UI is completely and utterly bespoke to them, and it does exactly what they need to do it and when they need it to do it. The other use cases here that we've talked about over on the right-hand side in the cloud use cases around label printing. So there was Zebra print language and a label API, which were unfamiliar to me. But in both cases, Node-RED was able to work with them. And so it meant that they had those labeling systems integrating directly with their ERP system. Again, being able to automate a bunch of their processes and save them a lot of time and a lot of money. So in this particular case, you can see the diversity, right? We started off earlier on talking about manufacturing. We talked about data integration. Actually, what we're seeing is people are now just realizing that this can just be used in so many different use cases. It's not just do I need to run Node-RED in the cloud or do I need to run Node-RED at edge? It's this thing has to be hybrid, right? And then based on the specific use cases, if you're integrating with a cloud-based ERP, for example, then yeah, sure, host your Node-RED in the cloud because that's a good way of being able to interface with the ERP system. Or if you need a dashboard that needs to be publicly available to execs or whoever, right, on a public internet connection, yeah, great. That's a really good use case for Node-RED in the cloud. If, however, you do want to do automated machinery control, right? And you need a quick feedback loop. You don't necessarily want to depend on internet connection to a public cloud, for example. You want very fast iteration, fast feedback. Run that at the edge, right? And so there's so many different use cases whereby now. Thank you, Josh, for confirming that I did get that correct. And then the idea behind this is that then yeah, you pick it as appropriate, right? And with something like FlowFuse, it makes it easy. It's just a click of a button to say I want that at the edge and I want that on hosted. If you've got this entire ecosystem, right, thousands of instances of Node-RED running at the edge, which is what we are seeing now with customers, they have thousands of pieces of machinery all running similar Node-RED flows. They are all reporting up into a UNS, for example, and then they have cloud-based dashboards interfacing with that UNS to be able to then display the relevant information as it's appropriate, or producing reports, or yeah, it might be PDF reports, it might be interactive dashboards using FlowFuse dashboard, it could be using Grafana or whatever. There's so many different integrations that yeah, the flexibility of Node-RED is boundless, really. So yeah, that's the particular use case, and we're hoping to get Josh. Actually, this is a nice segue into the last piece. So I do have a thank you, but I'm also going out as part of my closing notes. So there is a Node-RED conference running this year, and the call for papers, call for talk submissions is currently open. Indira will put links into the chat for if you want to sign up. And I know Josh has just submitted to do a talk at the Node-RED conference for this particular piece of work, and some of the advancements in and around machine vision that they're now doing in this space as well, and automating and saving, again, so much more time and so much more money. Yeah, that's the kind of main level of slides. So thank you very much for everyone for joining. We are going to do a Q&A open session now for kind of 15 or so minutes. So yeah, a survey will flag up at the end of this. Please do fill that in. It's really important for us to get that feedback. If you are interested in the Node-RED conference, thank you, Indira, for posting a link into there. Please do go and take a look at that and see how that, if that's of interest to you, we would love to see there, or even attend, right? If you don't want to necessarily submit a paper, it would be great to see how many people, see people turn up and pay attention. And yeah, so come along and listen to us ramble more about Node-RED. But yeah, after the session, the survey will appear, and please add questions to the Q&A pod now. I can see a few already in there. Steve, if there's any that you want me to handle, I think you've already flagged one for public answering, so I will do so. If you would like us to also reach out about FlowFuse, if you're interested in how FlowFuse can power your flows, please fill in the contact form, and one of our experts will be in touch with you shortly. So hope everyone enjoyed the session. And yeah, I'll go into Q&A now. So the first question that we have, I'm just going to quickly grab a drink. Do you have a recommendation for monitoring instances? For example, classic ITSM monitoring. And further to that, is it possible to monitor external statuses of flows or debugs without coding an API to publish stats? I'm on a train, so might drop, but apologies, we'll catch it in the recording. Steve, was there anything you wanted to answer that on live, or did you want me to answer that one? You're on mute at the moment.
Happened to one of us. Yeah, I'm good to take it, Joe. So yeah, ITSM, we've just added in, Joe, while I'm talking, if you could bring up FlowFuse on the CPU and memory monitoring. We are working on this, and observability is important. We know that. That's why we have just added memory and CPU monitoring, so you can see it for all of your instances for a particular instance, and you can zoom in and zoom out on the charts. Are you able to bring that up, Joe?
Yeah, I'm just doing on another screen first, and then I'll drag it across.
Regarding flow monitoring, there is an add-in called, let me see if I get the name right. Well, there is
I've just pulled up a random instance that we have on our FlowFuse team on FlowFuse Cloud, and that's got the CPU utilization and memory utilization running live. You've also got an equivalent list at the team level as well, where you can see every one of your instances, your hosted instances and remote instances, all running at the same time.
Yeah, so we do have, for flow monitoring, we have there is an add-in called Open Telemetry. I've not used it, but we do have a blog post, and I will link to it in the reply to this when we finish talking about it, which I believe permits that level of integration without you having to build all your own endpoints on your flows and say this is the timing of or the status of this particular flow. I haven't used it, so you'll have to forgive me for that. But regarding the rest of the ITSM monitoring, etc., as Joe was demonstrated there, we've started adding this kind of thing. We do plan, I believe there's a plan to collate that information into an endpoint and publish it in our API docs. But that's not there today. But please do get in touch. If this is something that blocks you from choosing FlowFuse, just get in touch and let us know. And we turn things around pretty quick.
So the other two questions that I can see at the moment, I'll grab on both fronts. So the high level, how do I differentiate Node-RED from conventional SCADA HMI historian systems in OT, such as Ignition or Aviva products? Is it a build your own SCADA from blocks? I'll start this off, and then I'm hoping Steve can jump in and probably add a little bit more detail. Something that now we are doing. So traditionally with Node-RED, it's a build everything from scratch, right? Which versus an out of the box solution is a disadvantage to a certain extent because there's a high level of onboarding. What we're now doing with FlowFuse is we have this concept of blueprints. So when you go to create an instance, hosted instance or remote instance in FlowFuse, you can select from a pre-existing collection of blueprints that we have created with the idea that actually you want an OEE dashboard, you can have that in 20 seconds. And then each of those are templates that then get populated into your Node-RED instances for you to then go in and customize and build on and everything else. And some of those are designed to then go into production environments. Some of them there just for inspiration. So our most recent blueprint that I've published was around using OpenAI, ChatGPT integration, having a chat interface within a dashboard, training your own LLMs. So they're just more of a inspiration thing rather than something you might want to throw into production. But blueprints are a really good way of getting started with that. And within FlowFuse now, we have our own MQTT broker offering. There may be some other things involved in the near future that are going to help in and around emulating historian and SCADA systems as well. So you are actually now also within FlowFuse getting the ecosystem around just the Node-RED flow to be able to start building full SCADA systems. And we already have customers that are doing so, that they have got their entire SCADA systems or MES systems even running within FlowFuse via Node-RED. Hopefully that does answer it. But Steve, if you wanted to add anything else on, then please do.
No, I'm just replying to Darren as well, because he asked that question twice. I'm just letting him know that you've answered it live and for him to watch the playback.
That's great. Thank you. The next question are what types of use cases are not possible via Node-RED? It's a good question.
I've,
We haven't, I can say we haven't had a customer come to us and say, can I do this? And our answers had to be no.
there's nearly always a way to do things, and sometimes we've got to say that's not the right way to do something. So I'll give you an example I know of where vibration monitoring, very high frequency, high speed vibration monitoring. It's kind of like, look, you need to do that in hardware really to get the level of accuracy and determinism. You need to do that in hardware, but there's no reason why them results cannot be averaged, summarized, and then transmitted for further processing in Node-RED. Node-RED still fits in there, but sometimes you just have to choose the right tool first.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say that's a great answer, Steve. Thank you. But yeah, I hope if there's any use cases people want to challenge us on, then you're more than welcome to. Please reach out or put it in the chat. But like I say, we've not had customers come to FlowFuse and say, oh, I couldn't do this in Node-RED, or how would I do this? I don't think I can do that. It's generally this is how you do it. So yeah, that's that one. And then we've got a potentially off-subject question, but are you answering that live, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I thought actually it'd be pretty good for you. I didn't know how to throw the question over at you, but you or I can answer this one. So in particular, the AI question about converting from dashboard 1 to dashboard 2, we are actually soon going to deliver something new in the Node-RED Assistant or the FlowFuse Assistant, whereby you can ask it to build anything you want and it will produce that. And Joe did a demonstration of this. I don't know if you have it available.
I don't have it to hand, but it's on the Node-RED forums if you want to go and take a look. The only thing I will also add to this, so that's for if you're already using dashboard 2 or FlowFuse dashboard, right? Then yes, you can use AI to help you. But the one thing that I've just linked in and actually put it in as the answer is we do also have an automated migration service. So if you are using dashboard 1 and you want to migrate to FlowFuse dashboard, I've just put a link. So if you're in the Q&A section, you'll see the link there as the answer. It's flowfuse.com/product/dashboard. There is a migration service where you can just upload your FlowJSON. And whilst we can't automatically migrate everything, we do most of it. Right, it will automatically convert all your pages, your groups, most of the standard nodes. In areas that it can't then convert it automatically, it will let you know so you can then dive in and make the changes. So for example, the template node in dashboard 1, it uses AngularJS, which was deprecated about 5 or 10 years ago. We are now using Vue.js. So they are completely different languages, right? So being able to convert between those is a little bit trickier. Daryl's got a question. You mentioned LLMs and AI. Could you elaborate a bit more, or could this be a topic for the future? I think undoubtedly there will be a dedicated webinar in the near future to AI, but I am absolutely happy to cover some of that now. So one of our blueprints that we have, and I'm trying to work out how best to get that up. If I just jump onto flowfuse.com and go to blueprint library. One of the blueprints in here on the next page is this one. And there's a video that you can go off and watch in your own time. I'm not going to sit here for 2 minutes and let you watch it. But the idea is you just drop that blueprint in and that will have a chat window with 3 variants. One that has hard-coded responses every time, so it doesn't actually use an LLM at all. It just gets you an idea of working with the dashboard and working with the chat interface. Then there is an example that uses a basic OpenAI integration. where there is a template node on the blueprint, which is the prompts on how you want the agent to behave and what you want it to be an expert in, and teaching it basically how you want it to perform. You just modify one node, and then suddenly you've got a personalized agent. So out of the box, what it actually does is as an expert in Node-RED, it will answer questions about Node-RED. So here I've said hi. It then knows, well, I've been told that I've got to answer questions about Node-RED. So hi, how can I help you with Node-RED today? I just say, what is it? No context at all about Node-RED, but it just knows that it's meant to be answering in that world. So that's available as a blueprint. And then the really nice use case that we extended this on is you can then also ask the agent to instead reply with a JSON message where it has two properties, text and location. The text property should include text-based response. The location should be latitude and longitude. So then when you ask it questions about, oh, where in the world is this, or where is the UK, or whatever, it returns both text answer, that then gets fed into the chat widget, the location answer via a split, via a switch node, gets then fed into the world map, and then that gets displayed on a world map. And that's a really nice use case of how Node-RED's ability to be able to integrate with multiple different things can be integrated also then with an LLM. So yeah, feel free to dive into that, and no doubt there'll be some work that we do probably on a webinar at the future. And then, as Steve alluded to earlier, we are now also working on how AI is used within the editor experience of Node-RED. So something that we've already shipped is what we call the FlowFuse assistant. So as you've got the Node-RED editor open, if you drop in a function node, you can get the LLM agent to write the whole function for you. It's completely aware of Node-RED. It understands the different inputs and the outputs and how to behave in that regard. We've now also then just shipped today, I think, Steve. No, not yet. It's shipping tomorrow, maybe. For one for dashboard nodes. So when you drop in a template node on dashboard, you can ask it to create full templates for you and widgets that then go and end up in your UI. And then we are also in the background working on, we can talk about it because it's on GitHub, but now having like auto completion for flows as well. So as you drop on a node, automatically then suggesting what it thinks the next node is going to be. So we're really leveling up that AI experience around Node-RED within the FlowFuse world as well. Yes, Steve.
Yeah, that dovetails into the question by Hussein about dashboard widgets using AI. So the programming of those widgets, like the template widgets via AI, is coming soon, is the answer. Somebody else mentioned when is it coming, and I've replied in text as soon, probably by the end of this week, Joe.
That's great. Thank you. So yeah, so that's Hussein's answer done. So Ivan, is Node-RED project alive? It's definitely alive. We have the last time I checked, I think it's getting multiple millions of downloads a year, so it's very much alive. And I know that there is multiple betas that have been released in the last few weeks. So there is a 4.1 scheduled in the near future, and I think Node-RED 5 will probably be not too far away as well. So yes, very much in active development. We are contributing, the community is contributing. It's an open source project, right? So FlowFuse has invested interest because our CTO is Nick, who created Node-RED. But we are also, Node-RED is still an open source project, right? So anyone can contribute to Node-RED. If you've got new features you want to be adding in plugins or third-party nodes, whatever, it's still absolutely an active project. So Node-RED is very much alive.
To add to that, during this particular meeting, I've heard 4 or 5 pull requests get merged into Node-RED. It's very, very active.
Okay, good. Yeah, it literally just the last 50 minutes. So yes, very much active. In then Vito's question, is there a minimum hardware requirement to have an edge hosted instance of FlowFuse? I tried out as well Node-RED installed in Termux on Android mobile device, and it works like a charm. Are there FlowFuse services also possible to run this way, or is there a dedicated app on mobile service? So FlowFuse is more of the management ecosystem. So Node-RED running in FlowFuse, the actual Node-RED experience is still the same, right? It's still a Node-RED editor. It can still run on the same hardware, and anything that Node-RED can run on its own will also run on when managed by FlowFuse. The purpose of FlowFuse in this use case is managing multiple instances of Node-RED, starting to make sure you've got the right security in place, having DevOps pipelines, like having separate development environments and production environments. So what FlowFuse is adding is really the ability to scale up an enterprise and professionalize your Node-RED environments, right? That's really the core purpose for FlowFuse. You might want one done. Is it possible with AI to optimize complete flows? That's an interesting question. Optimize, I'm guessing you mean in terms of performance. So the main use cases around that I can think of would be within a function node. So yes, if you're using Node-RED on FlowFuse, then yes, absolutely. All the function nodes could be optimized using AI because you can just have a conversation with the function node directly. We're also looking to have a higher level chat interface within Node-RED as well, so that you can start asking for more advice, or if there's a particular node that you want to do or a particular piece of functionality and you don't know what nodes are out there that could help you, having that chat kind of assistant interface within Node-RED directly as well is something that we're looking at, and potentially that's a really good use case that you've proposed there. Actually, thank you for sharing that. That's not
There is
necessary.
there is the flows explainer, which kind of goes some way. It's like halfway to this, which we've
Yeah,
just introduced last week.
yeah, that's a great point. Actually, I've probably got that up on here as well. So if we go onto our website and go into changelog, that's the new homepage we just shipped. There's the flow explainer. So the idea of this is that you can highlight any flows, right click them, ask it to explain it, and it will then tell you exactly what that flow is doing. It gives you a very nice high level summary, but also will give you a breakdown on each of the different nodes. So if you've got a load of function nodes, or the particular use case here was around, we have a lot of large teams working on FlowFuse. So some developers of nodes and flows will build slightly differently to others. So when they're coming into the same flow, sometimes it's not always easy for them to understand what's going on. So they can just drag it, right click, explain it to me, and get context and get answers around what Node-RED is doing. And that's available on any hosted or remote instance as well. And the changelog is a really nice way of also just being able to see what we're up to. So yeah, you can see this all the time. That's the performance view that Steve alluded to earlier. We have the idea of the Git integrations within our pipelines of being able to push from an instance into a Git workflow, all the new stuff that we're shipping. And we're shipping pretty much every day new updates. Formally, we release every 4 weeks. For self-hosted users, FlowFuse Cloud is updated every day. So in terms of minimum hardware requirements for running FlowFuse, it's on our documentation as well, actually. So if you go into our docs and go into the FlowFuse self-hosted, there is a bunch of work in here around what our recommended hardware and areas are. So take a dive into there if you're looking to self-host FlowFuse. Reach out to us specifically as well. But if you are managing multiple FlowFuse environments, then Node-RED environments, then FlowFuse is a great way to do it. Yes, go on, Steve.
So the question also touches on, I think, more about Edge and devices running on, for example, you've got their Termux on Android. You can run Node-RED and you can communicate and work with FlowFuse, but I have not tested what we call our device agent for running on Edge for getting that slick management interface with FlowFuse. But it's definitely worth a try. So I will make a note of that and respond on the Q&A so that we capture this.
Oh,
One question.
just in a
So
question come in just as we were finishing.
you've got a minute to answer it.
If I want to sell a product that uses Node-RED, what do I need to do? So Node-RED itself is a completely open source project. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. If you are then looking at having that Node-RED run multiple times or multiple different instances of that Node-RED, and you probably are going to want an environment by which you can manage all of those. So FlowFuse is a really good way of doing that. We have got customers that do this.
Exactly. Yeah. Diego had asked in the web chat, and I asked him to put his question on the Q&A so it gets a formal answer. And some of our customers do this. They use the Teams concept to generate their customers, and they service all of their Node-REDs via that singular FlowFuse interface. So everything's nicely managed. You get all your software bill of materials, so you know who's up to date and all of that sort of, and the monitoring through the CPU and memory. Yes, is the answer. They do this. This model exists today, Diego. You can sell your service to your customers using our product.
Yeah. And so just to emphasize on what Steve mentioned there, we have a hierarchy within FlowFuse. We have FlowFuse as a platform. Within FlowFuse, then you have this concept of teams. You can create as many teams as you like, but they have completely isolated environments. So each team will have its own Node-RED instances that you can then manage as well. So yeah, for each of your customers, you could have a given team, and then you have your Node-RED instances spun up within that. You could, if you really wanted to, also just have one team and then have all of your Node-RED instances in there as well. But then you have a little bit of a risk in terms of contamination of customer data. So it depends on exactly what your use case is. But yeah, absolutely would be able to support you in that regard. If you want to talk it over in more detail, then please do reach out, and one of our sales guys can talk to you in a bit more detail about how you would architect it in specifically for the use case that you're working on. So I'm not seeing any more questions. So just to reiterate, thank you very much again for everyone listening. Oh, one thing I will quickly say, someone said about please add me to dashboards with AI. The AI features and all of the AI features that we are shipping are available on every tier on FlowFuse. So on FlowFuse Cloud, it is available from the starter tier upwards. So yeah, it's not just an enterprise feature that we have. This is something that is available to anyone that's using FlowFuse. The presentations will get sent out to everybody, and the recordings as well. So yes, you will absolutely be able to get access to the presentation itself. Please notify me with Dashboard AI features. Yeah, if you kind of follow us on socials as well, that is the best place to keep an eye on everything that we're doing. If you would like to talk to us about FlowFuse, do reach out. It's also part of the feedback form as well if you want us to reach out. But you can just go onto FlowFuse, contact us, and just book a meeting in directly. And then one of our guys will be able to talk to you about the work that you're doing, to see whether FlowFuse is appropriate. But thanks again, and until the next deployment.